So if you've ever tried to learn a new language, you probably think your biggest enemy is, I don't know, the grammar rule book.
Oh, absolutely. Or just a total lack of discipline.
Right, exactly.
Like,
Like you just need to study harder or you need more flashcards. But I used to believe that too. I'd sit there at like 8:00 p.m. after a long day, staring at vocabulary words, just completely frustrated because nothing was sticking.
that you're just hitting a wall.
A massive wall. But according to the research we're unpacking today, your actual biggest enemy might just be your alarm clock.
Which is such a wild paradigm shift.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because depending on your underlying biology, studying at 8:00 a.m. or 8:00 p.m. could literally be cutting your brain's processing power in half.
It completely flips that conventional wisdom of, just study harder right on its head.
Yeah.
Because we often treat learning as this abstract, purely mental effort. We just totally forget that the brain is a biological organ.
Right, it's meat, it's physical hardware.
Exactly. It's governed by physical laws, metabolic energy, and these internal timers that we just ignore.
So today we are doing a deep dive into the fascinating science, the strategy, and really the real-world power behind how we acquire a second language.
And by extension, how we master any complex new skill.
Exactly. Because if we can understand how to hack that specific process, learning a language, we can essentially rewrite how we approach growth in general. We're pulling from a really diverse stack of sources for you today.
It's a great lineup.
Yeah, we have a neurolinguistic study on how our internal circadian rhythms dictate language performance. We're also going to look at an academic breakdown of the Oxford taxonomy.
Which sounds intimidating, but it's really just a look at learning strategies among university graduates.
Right. And then we have a practical guide on English journaling from Sequoia Education. And finally, to see how all this hardware and software translates into massive global impact, we are looking at a biographical study of Alibaba founder Jack Ma.
Specifically his early days as an English learner, which is just a crazy story.
It is. It provides this complete spectrum. We're traveling from the microscopic, cellular level of cognitive timing all the way up to how acquiring a new vocabulary can fundamentally alter a person's entire geopolitical worldview.
It really is all connected.
So to start, I like to think of learning a new language as trying to install a completely new operating system in your brain while the old one is still actively running.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
Right. It takes up incredible bandwidth. The system lags, the fans are whirring, and you really have to know exactly when and how to hit install without crashing the machine.
Yeah, if you do it at the wrong time, you just get the blue screen of death.
Exactly. So let's look at the when first.
Yeah.
This brings us to a 2017 study by researchers Keys Debut and Fang Fang.
Right, they investigated circadian rhythms, dividing people into what they call chronotypes.
Chronotypes. So we were talking about larks, the early morning types versus owls, the evening types.
And to do this accurately, the researchers didn't just casually ask people, like, hey, do you like mornings?
Because everyone lies about that anyway.
Right, exactly. They used the Munich Chronotype Questionnaire, which calculates something called your mid-sleep time.
Okay, so wait. What exactly is a mid-sleep time? How would I calculate that for myself?
So it's the exact midpoint between the moment you fall asleep and the moment you naturally wake up.
Naturally wake up.
Yeah, on a day where you have absolutely no obligations, no alarms, no really meetings, nothing.
Oh, okay. So like a Saturday?
Right. So if you sleep from midnight to 8:00 a.m. on a Saturday, your mid-sleep time is 4:00 a.m.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
And this metric anchors your biological clock. By grouping people this way, the researchers could test what they called the synchrony effect.
The synchrony effect.
Yeah, which is basically the hypothesis that your optimal cognitive performance happens when the demands of a specific task align perfectly with your peak circadian arousal period.
Doing the hard stuff when your brain actually has the fuel to do it. I mean, that makes logical sense.
It does. But the fascinating part is how they actually tested it.
Yeah, because they didn't just give these larks and owls a generic math test. They tested very different types of brain functions to see what was actually affected by the clock.
Right. So first, they gave them verbal fluency tasks.
Which was basically naming as many words starting with the letter S in 60 seconds, or, listing as many fruits and vegetables as possible.
Yeah, just rapid-fire word generation. And then they gave them Stroop tests.
Okay, remind me, the Stroop test, that's the color one, right?
Exactly. This Stroop test measures inhibitory control. It's a classic psychological tool. You see the word green printed on a screen, but the physical ink is colored blue.
Right, and your brain naturally just wants to read the text. It wants to say green.
Yeah, but the task requires you to suppress that automatic urge and name the color of the ink instead. You have to literally hit the mental brakes.
So they tested generating words versus hitting the brakes. And the results here completely shattered my assumptions about how we process information.
Oh, totally. It's wild.
Because the time of day, whether a lark was tested in the morning or an owl was tested late at night, did not significantly alter their ability to hit the brakes.
No, not at all. Inhibitory control on that Stroop test was remarkably stable across the board, regardless of the time.
Which is crazy to me, but time of day heavily dictated lexical access, like generating words was wildly dependent on the clock.
The divergence was profound. The larks hit their peak performance for word generation roughly 4 hours after waking up.
4 hours. Okay.
But the owls required a full 8 hours of wakefulness to reach their peak lexical access.
Great, 8 hours. So if you wake up at 7 a.m., you aren't peaking until 3:0 p.m.?
Exactly. So if you are an owl listening to this and you are taking a conversational language class at like 8:00 a.m.,
You are essentially asking your brain to perform a high-level task with half its battery depleted.
you're just setting yourself up for failure.
But why the difference? I mean, why is generating words so incredibly sensitive to our biological clocks, while stopping ourselves from making an error that inhibitory control remains completely stable?
It's a great question. And the answer lies in how these different networks operate metabolically in the brain.
Okay.
Inhibitory control is primarily a localized function in the frontal lobe. It acts as like a localized brake pedal, just a quick physical stop.
Right.
Word generation, on the other hand, is not just opening a single file folder.
Mm.
When you search for a word, you are lighting up a vast, sprawling semantic network.
You're pulling from everywhere.
Right. You're activating synonyms, phonetics, syntax, physical memory. That massive neural grid requires peak metabolic energy to function smoothly.
Ah, I see.
And that energy availability is directly tied to your cortisol curves and circadian alerting signals, which just peak at entirely different times for larks versus owls.
It's like you are sending a clerk to run through a giant warehouse to find one specific item.
Yes, perfect analogy.
If that clerk hasn't had their coffee yet, the search just takes twice as long. Your biological clock dictates when that warehouse is fully staffed and ready for business.
Exactly.
But, and this is the kicker, sitting down at your optimal hour is completely useless if your internal filing system is just a chaotic mess.
Which perfectly transitions us from our biological hardware to our strategic software.
Right, because once your brain is primed and awake, what conscious strategies are you actually employing to capture the information?
This leads us to the study analyzing language learning strategies among English as a second language university graduates.
Yeah, and the researchers here utilized Oxford's 1990 taxonomy, which I found to be an incredibly helpful way to just categorize how humans learn in general.
It's a great framework. It divides strategies into two main camps, direct and indirect.
Let's break those down. What's in the direct camp?
So direct strategies involve actively wrestling with the language itself. This includes memory strategies, for storing rules, cognitive strategies for practicing, and compensation strategies.
Compensation strategies are my absolute favorite. That is when you, forget the word for umbrella, so you just start doing a chaotic charade holding an invisible roof over your head in the rain.
Exactly. We have all been there. It's just survival mode communication.
Total survival mode. And then you have the indirect strategies, which manage the learning environment itself, right?
Right. Those include social strategies for interacting with native speakers, effective strategies for managing your emotional anxiety, and metacognitive strategies.
Metacognition. That's a big buzzword.
It is, but it's essentially just thinking about your own thinking. It involves planning your goals, tracking your errors, and evaluating your overall progress.
Being the CEO of your own learning.
Exactly that. So the researchers examined two groups of highly successful graduates, those majoring in teaching English as a second language, the TESL group, and the non-TESL majors.
And the big finding here was that above all else, both groups relied heavily on those metacognitive strategies.
Heavily. They were the architects of their own learning.
Right. They didn't just wait for a teacher to hand them a worksheet. They built their own curriculums. They were actively monitoring what worked for them and what didn't.
But the divergence occurred in their secondary strategies.
This is where it gets interesting.
Yeah, the TESOL graduates, the individuals actually training to become teachers, they favored memory strategies. They prioritize storing and retrieving rules, mastering grammar structures, and just really understanding the mechanics of the language.
Which tracks perfectly. I mean, if you have to teach the rule book to someone else, you need to memorize the rule book yourself.
Exactly. The non-TESOL graduates, however, they favored social strategies.
Because they just needed to use it.
Right. They sought out interaction. They prioritized real-world communication over flawless grammar.
But here is the data point that literally stopped me in my tracks when I was reading the source material.
The blind spot.
The massive blind spot. Despite their different career paths, both groups shared this glaring omission. When ranking these tools, both groups placed effective strategies, managing fear, lowering anxiety, encouraging yourself dead last.
Yeah, it was their least used tactic across the board. They virtually abandoned emotional regulation.
Wait, that makes no sense to me. Anyone who has ever tried to, order a coffee in Paris or Tokyo knows the panic is the hardest part of the process.
Oh, it's terrifying.
You feel like a toddler, your heart rate spikes. Are these graduates just robots? How can advanced learners completely ignore the emotional temperature gauge of acquiring a language?
It really does look contradictory on paper until you consider who we are actually studying here.
Okay, what do you mean?
These are successful university graduates. By the time they reached this elite academic level, they had already survived the brutal initial anxiety phase of language acquisition.
Oh.
They ran the gauntlet early on.
They built taluses.
Precisely. They developed a high tolerance to the embarrassment. Because cognitive bandwidth is a limited resource, they just shifted their energy away from emotional soothing and reallocated it toward hard tactics.
Like the metacognitive planning or mechanical memorization?
Right. They just outgrew the need for effective strategies.
But the danger here is survivorship bias.
Huge survivorship bias.
Because if a beginner looks at this study and thinks, oh, well, successful people just use metacognition, I should just force myself to study harder and ignore my panic, they are going to completely crash the system.
Absolutely. Ignoring that emotional temperature gauge as a beginner guarantees burnout.
Because your brain is literally fighting you.
It is. The amygdala perceives the social embarrassment of speaking poorly as a literal physical threat.
Wow.
Yeah, and if you do not actively soothe that threat, the brain will block your ability to learn. You will just quit long before you develop the calluses necessary to rely purely on metacognition.
Which presents a very real puzzle for someone just starting out.
It does.
If metacognition is the ultimate tool of mastery, but ignoring your emotions causes beginners to quit, how does a novice build that high-level architecture without getting completely overwhelmed by fear?
They need a bridge between the two. And the Esquio Education Guide offers a highly practical solution to this exact problem.
Journaling.
Yes, journaling.
I have to say, I found this guide on English journaling for beginners to be a complete paradigm shift.
It's so simple, but so effective.
Because when you speak to a stranger, the anxiety is real time and it's high stakes. Journaling provides this completely private, controlled environment for vocabulary expansion.
And the methodology is key here. The guide does not suggest writing long, sweeping essays. It recommends 5 minutes a day.
Just 5 minutes.
Right. The goal is consistency over volume. It establishes the habit without triggering that amygdala fear response we were just talking about.
And they offer specific, low-stakes prompts to eliminate the blank page paralysis. Things like, describe your morning routine in detail, or what is one thing that made you happy today?
Which is brilliant, because by removing the cognitive burden of deciding what to write, the learner can focus entirely on how to construct the sentence in their target language.
It frees up all that bandwidth. And educational research actually supports this methodology, right?
It does. Studies by Benson and Voller, alongside Wang and Wen, they demonstrate that journaling actively improves both sentence construction and critical thinking.
But why? What is the actual mechanism there?
The mechanism is context. Think about it. Rote memorization from a textbook often fails because the words lack personal relevance.
Yeah.
You're memorizing a sentence about like a train timetable in a city you don't live in.
Right, the boy has a red apple, who cares?
Exactly. But journaling forces the learner to repeatedly use new vocabulary in contexts that are intimately tied to their own life.
It's personal.
Highly personal. And that personal relevance builds thicker, more resilient neural pathways.
I love that. It brilliantly disguises an effective strategy as a cognitive strategy.
That's exactly what it's doing.
You lower your anxiety because you are writing in a private space where the grammar police cannot arrest you. You feel safe. And while you feel safe, you are naturally practicing sentence structure.
But the most potent layer of this practice the part that ties back to the university graduates, is how it develops metacognition.
Ah, right, because you have to review it.
Exactly. The guide heavily emphasizes the importance of reflective practice. Every few weeks, the learner must read their past entries.
Looking backwards to move forward.
Yes, because learning a language, or any complex skill, often feels invisible. The progress is just so incremental that it feels like you are standing perfectly still.
It's so discouraging day to day.
But when a learner flips back to an entry from a month ago, they literally see their vocabulary grow.
They spot grammatical errors they made back then that they would never make today.
Right, and it provides tangible, undeniable proof of progress.
So they're acting as the architect of their own learning, just like the successful university graduates.
Exactly. They are monitoring and evaluating their own system, but they built up to that skill in a psychologically safe environment.
It creates this incredible feedback loop of confidence. It proves the new operating system is successfully installing, even if the daily progress feels agonizingly slow.
It's a game changer for beginners.
So we have scaled from the microscopic level of cellular timing through the academic taxonomy of study habits down to the quiet, private power of a 5-minute daily journal.
The full spectrum.
But what happens when you take these honed language skills out of the notebook and release them into the wild?
Well, then we see the profound real-world payoff. And the biography of Alibaba founder Jack Ma serves as just the perfect illustration of these concepts in action.
His trajectory is astonishing. I mean, long before he founded a global tech empire operating in over 200 countries, he was an English teacher from very humble beginnings in Hangzhou, China.
And the method he used to acquire English is a literal masterclass in applying these strategies.
Because he completely bypassed the traditional classroom.
He did. He employed this radical, high-stakes version of the social strategy from the Oxford taxonomy.
What he did is just wild to me. Every single morning, for 9 years, regardless of the weather, he rode his bicycle to a prominent hotel in Hangzhou.
40 minutes in the snow, the rain, it didn't matter.
Right. And he waited outside and offered to be a free tour guide for foreign visitors in exchange for practicing his English.
He essentially hacked the immersion model.
Totally hacked it. By acting as a free guide, he created an intense, real-world language program for himself without ever purchasing a plane ticket or hiring a tutor.
He forced himself into high-stakes communication daily.
But the Prolingua Global documentary highlights the secondary consequence of this strategy, which ultimately became his greatest asset, right?
Yes, and this is the most important part of his story. He was not just acquiring vocabulary. By spending thousands of hours conversing with international tourists, answering their questions, and just listening to their observations, he gained an entirely different perspective on his own country.
How so? Like, what was he actually learning from them that he couldn't learn from, a book?
Well, you have to picture China in the 1980s and early 90s. The flow of global information was highly restricted.
Right, pre-internet boom.
Exactly. His peers in Hangzhou were looking at the world through a very localized traditional lens. But Jack Ma, through his tourists, was constantly being exposed to Western business concepts.
He was getting a global business education for free on his bicycle.
Yes, global market dynamics, entirely foreign ways of assessing value and infrastructure. The language was not merely a communication tool for him. It acted as a conceptual lens.
He started seeing his own backyard through the eyes of the outside world.
Exactly.
And this connects directly to his famous 1995 trip to the United States. It was his first time leaving his home country.
Such a pivotal moment.
He goes to Seattle, sits down at a desk, touches a computer keyboard for the very first time, and is introduced to the World Wide Web.
And what does he do?
He types the word China into the search bar.
And the screen returns 0 results.
Nothing. No data. A complete digital void regarding his home country.
Now, anyone else could have stared at that blank screen and simply thought the computer was broken or that the internet was a stupid fad.
Right. But Jack Ma's story demonstrates that language acquisition fundamentally changes cognitive flexibility.
It rewires you.
Because he had spent a decade utilizing a social strategy to learn English, he had developed deep, deep intercultural skills. When he saw that blank screen, he didn't just see a missing search result.
No, he saw a massive global gap in the infrastructure of commerce.
The English vocabulary itself did not build Alibaba. The worldview that the vocabulary unlocked is what built Alibaba.
That is exactly the takeaway. The language provided the cognitive software required to recognize a multi-billion-dollar opportunity that others simply could not perceive.
That brings our journey full circle beautifully.
It really does.
We've traveled from the internal biological clocks that dictate when our mental filing quirks are actually awake and functioning,
Right, the larks and the owls.
through the metacognitive architectures designed by successful graduates. We explored the anxiety-lowering power of a simple 5-minute private journal.
Bridging that emotional gap.
And finally, we saw how a free tour guide in Hangzhou used language to completely alter his geopolitical worldview and build an absolute empire.
It just proves that learning is never a passive event.
No.
It requires the deliberate alignment of your physical biology with your strategic choices.
So if you are listening to this right now, I want you to think about the complex skills you are currently trying to master. Really evaluate your own hardware and software.
Ask yourself the hard questions.
Right. Are you constantly exhausted because you are an owl trying to force deep lexical learning at 7 a.m.?
Are you relying entirely on rote memorization and just ignoring the social interaction that provides vital context?
Or maybe are you ignoring your own emotional temperature gauge and risking inevitable burnout?
The overarching insight here is to become the conscious architect of your own learning process.
You have to take ownership.
Yes. Respect the hardware you were born with, and be highly intentional about the software you choose to install.
The sources today reveal a really profound truth. A new language, or honestly any complex new skill, isn't just a subject you memorize. It is a living system that actively reshapes you.
It changes your identity.
It does. If learning a new language requires you to honor your biological timing, forces you to confront your emotional anxieties, and exposes you to entirely foreign worldviews, what else in your life might completely transform if you simply changed the language you use to describe it?
That is a powerful question.
Something to mull over until our next deep dive. Thanks for listening.